Okay, we're live now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Well, everyone, welcome to this virtual meeting of the Children and Young People's Social Care and Services Scrutiny Panel. Can I remind all participants that normal rules of procedure apply? For example, comments and questions need to be directed through the Chair. As we are meeting virtually, proceedings may take slightly longer, so your patience is appreciated. Sorry. As per our virtual meeting procedures, if any questions have been received prior to the meeting, I will call on the relevant member at the appropriate time to raise that question. If you are invited to speak, please state your name and be as specific as possible about which issue you are speaking about. Whilst members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube Live, they will not be able to actively participate or comment on the proceedings. As this meeting is being live streamed, can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this? Thank you. Before we go to agenda items, I just wanted to thank Councillor Dodds for replacing me at very short notice last time out. I really appreciate that. And also a big thank you to Councillor Chris Cook for his participation in the meeting last week. It was very personal, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again. We are here to represent the people, and the people. It's important that the people feel they're represented in the council, and I think Chris gave a really good example of representation in what he did last week. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. So we'll go right to agenda one. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Saunders. I believe Councillor Cooper was substituting, but he doesn't appear to be here at the moment.
Thank you. It might be he's having the same problems as Carolyn. He may join us a little bit. We'll keep an eye out for that.
Okay.
We'll move on to item agenda number 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Item agenda number 3, minutes of the last meeting. Can we accept the minutes of the last meeting from the 12th of October as correct? I wasn't here, so can I have somebody? Councillor Dodds, yes, thank you. Excellent.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, we're going to change the order of the agenda slightly as 2 of the officers attending in relation to item agenda number 4 are unable to attend until 5 p.m. So our first item will be agenda number 5, the update on the Ofsted visit to the match. I like to say MAC, but some people say match. So we'll go right in agenda number 5, which is the update on the Ofsted visit. Sue Butcher, Director of Children's Services, is here to provide the panel with a presentation to update the panel on in relation to the Ofsted visit to the MAC. Sue, can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. Jo, are you going to share the presentation, please? I'm very mindful that some of you will have heard the presentation more than once. It is slightly changed from the original presentation that we did, and I've truncated some of the content in terms of the actual findings, but we can talk around those if people want to discuss them a bit more or have specific issues from questions from when they saw the presentation before. I'm going to do sort of top and bottom the presentation as it is, and Rachel, Director of Children's Care, is going to come in and talk more about the details, although truncated. So here we are. So again, this is to present an overview of the findings from the Ofsted monitoring visit. I know that members have been provided with a copy of the letter, the full letter that's gone out, and I say this is highlights or pertinent points from that discussion. Just to move on then, you'll see, and you will see this, I hope, time and time again. It is our Middlesbrough Children's Matter logo, the heart with the hands round it, Middlesbrough Children Matter, and our mission is to show Middlesbrough children that they matter. So this is, of course, we have the Middlesbrough Council logo there as well. It's important that we show that we are part of Middlesbrough Council. So we really want to emphasise our mission, our strapline, as it were, and our mission. Okay, so moving on, just to take you through what happened. We had a virtual monitoring visit. 2 inspectors reviewed the progress made by the match. I call it the match, Councillor Garvey. I think MAC is something to do with Concord. I think that was MAC 2 or something like that. But we'll move on from there. That was my very not very good attempt at a joke. So we will just draw a line under that and move on. So the front door of our service, and we focused on the quality and screening of referrals. That's the work coming into our service. The identification of and our response to risk. Are children safe in Middlesbrough? Do our partner agencies understand our thresholds for social work support and the quality of our initial assessment and planning? Although the inspectors were only with us virtually on site for 2 days, that's sort of the tip of the iceberg, really. And we have to provide them with a great deal of information, performance information, audit information, staffing, structures, a whole tranche of information which we call Annex A. And also some interviews took place before the actual 2 days. The inspectors that we hadn't done a completely virtual visit before, so I think there was a little bit of apprehension, but actually I think it went really well. The inspectors had case discussions with frontline staff and interviews with members and officers. And I've put at the bottom, not an inspection, question mark, question mark. It is a monitoring visit, and there is, there are suggestions for improving practice, which is helpful, but I think we have to remember that Ofsted inspectors are Ofsted inspectors, and they will be viewing our work with a critical eye. Okay, so the next slide is about the immediate feedback. This was at the end of day 2, and it is also in the letter. We've made some progress. Some is an Ofsted word, and they have specific words that they use, like some and most and all. But we've made some progress in improving social work practice in the front door of the service, and that was obviously one of their focus and one of the things that we're really pleased that they'd seen our improvement in. They'd seen improvement in the immediate response to 16 to 17-year-old homeless young people. Performance monitoring, including a new quality assurance framework. In fact, the inspector was very impressed with the framework and did mention that it was something that she might like to share in other authorities. And the strategic oversight of services for children and young people. That's, do we know ourselves? Do we know ourselves well enough to be able to improve? The last sort of full sentence on this slide is, however, leaders know that there is significant work to do in improving the quality of practice for children and young people in other areas of the service, which remains not good enough. We know that. We know that there is a great deal to do. And finally, the letter this time is not published, although we have been very transparent and we have circulated it to partners as well and to various members of improvement boards. We think that's the right thing to do because we think learning has to be across the partnership and indeed corporately. The next visits that we get, they will be put on Ofsted's website. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel now to take you through some of the details.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Thank you, Chair. I'm Rachel Farnham, Director of Children's Care. So in terms of some of the details of the findings, Ofsted said that from a leadership perspective, they could see continuing commitment from the Chief Exec in the Council and the lead member for Children's Services. They could see evidence of a determination and vision for improving the quality of interventions and making a difference for children and families in the town. And they said that senior leaders now have a realistic understanding in terms of the weaknesses in practice, and that was informing an appropriately focused improvement plan. So that was a really strong message. We know ourselves well, and actually we know what we need to do to improve. In terms of the match, the multi-agency children's hub, they saw evidence of substantially improved practice in the quality of referrals, screening, decision-making and management oversight, which was really positive. They described an exponential increase in demand but said that that was due to a necessary change in the application of thresholds for a service. Because in the last inspection, Ofsted told us that some children were waiting too long for a service, but they could see evidence that we'd actually realigned the thresholds. The right children were getting the right support at the right time. But the result of that is an increase in demand. They said that most contacts by partner agencies were being converted to referrals, which, in line with the previous bullet point, they saw as a positive. And they said that partners were demonstrating an improved understanding of thresholds. Next slide, please. In terms of the assessment team, which is the other part of the front door which they inspected, they said that the quality of some children's assessments have improved, but there's an issue around timeliness of assessments. They said risk was better understood, and they said the child's voice is now heard through direct work. What Ofsted saw was that direct work was attached to all assessments for children, but they did say that really we needed to be a bit more consistent throughout the rest of the casework in terms of evidence in the child's voice. They said children's identity and diversity needs are narrowly understood, and they said that was in relation to, they said that in the main, we understand children's identity and diversity needs in terms of religion and ethnicity, and actually we needed to broaden our understanding of that in assessments. And Ofsted commented on the Council's rigorous approach to safety planning for children during the COVID-19 pandemic. They asked a lot of questions about how we'd responded to children in light of the first wave of the pandemic, and they saw particularly robust practice in relation to children who are in domestic abuse situations in lockdown. Next slide, please. That's over to you, Sue, for this slide.
So just to sum up, really, I think if you pick out two things, and I've picked out two things here, the visit found substantially improved practice in the match, especially in the quality of referral screening and in decision making and management oversight. So a really good, positive, if that's not to mix words, and particularly when we refer ourselves back to the Ofsted inspection that we had, which found little confidence in the front door and not very much confidence in the way that we were overseeing what was happening. In terms of areas for improvement, Ofsted did make it clear that high caseloads are having an effect on the quality of our practice for children. The throughput of cases, the timeliness of work completed, management oversight, and the ability to embed learning from audits and training. So yeah, high caseloads are having an impact on the pace at which we can improve. Okay, so the next slide is the end slide. So just a bit about next steps. We have at the moment our commissioner with us, Peter Dwyer. He's virtually with us for 3 days, and he's talking to various people and various cohorts. So I know I had a 45-minute interview with him this afternoon. I know that Councillor High had a session with him with Councillor Smiles this afternoon, which I think went well. And he will be writing a report which will go to the Minister, and the specific question for him really is whether we retain control of our services. This is by way of a stock take report, so I will be looking forward to reading what he's got to say. We have a feedback meeting planned, which I think is towards the end of November. On the 9th of December, we have an annual engagement conversation with Ofsted. These happen with all local authorities. Ours is sort of like crunched in between other things. That's a meeting with Ofsted, of course, for across children's services. So they will be looking at education information as well as social care information. And they will be asking us to come up with a plan to meet any specific concerns. Any time now, from now between the 31st of March next year, we will have a 3-day focused visit from Ofsted. That's a wider visit with 3 inspectors plus an education inspector, and they will be looking at the quality of our decision making right throughout the service, so into education support services. I have tried very hard to push to find out when it might be, as you would expect. We've only just had a monitoring visit, so we need to look at, and they, I'm sure, will look at when they will be able to see progress. And then in May 2021, our commissioner will return and he will do another probably 3-day visit with another report to the commissioner. So you can see we've got quite a packed agenda in front of us. We have regular improvement boards as well. So there's a lot to do in terms of managing the process, but more specifically in terms of continuing to improve our practice for children and young people. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm gonna put to the panel for questions in a second. I've got one of my own first, if that's okay. In the overall findings, the local authority says made some progress, but significant work still to do. Can you give us some examples of what areas are key for concern, and so we know what we're looking out for?
Okay, I think that's a really good question. Thank you, Chair. I think there is work around workforce and a workforce strategy. I think that, covers things like recruitment and retention of social workers. I think it also covers, our offer to social workers in terms of overall development. I think it also covers things like our Centre for Practice Excellence. So I think that there are generally things to do around workforce strategy. I think also we need to continue to look at chair permanency. It's still an issue, and it is one of those issues which will take some time. So I think that, our children getting to their forever homes as swiftly as they should be. And I think for me, currently at this present time, it is about how we continue to manage our work and our workforce through COVID and beyond, to whether, where COVID will leave us, and that will obviously be next year sometime, but how we continue to practice and improve, because, we still need to improve through COVID. So answering that question relatively quickly, they would be my priorities, or what I think that you as Children's Scrutiny could be scrutinising us on, I would say. I don't know whether Rachel wants to add anything to those three.
No, so I would agree. They are absolutely critical priorities. I think I would just say that Ofsted came on the 23rd and 24th of September and just looked at the front door. So that was just one part of the service. So I guess the improvements we continue to make would be children further on in the system, children who are subject to child protection plans, or children who are looked after. So we continue to try and to improve the quality of social work practice in those areas.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. So, does anybody have any questions? Councillor Cook.
Hiya. So, thank you, Chair. The change in thresholds had then increased the number of cases. What does that sort of increase look like sort of rough percentage-wise? And is that one of the key factors that is increasing the workload or caseload of the social workers?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of thresholds, our thresholds were too high, as you probably are aware, and so we had to reduce our thresholds. That was a very clear message from the full inspection. So we had to, in reducing our thresholds, it meant that more work came into their social work system, and it certainly is a major part of the increase in our caseloads. In terms of the percentage of work, Rachel, I think it was around 20%, 25%. That's what's in my head. I don't know whether you've got a better figure or.
In terms of the front door, we have seen we've seen an increase in around 36% increase in the number of assessments that we've undertaken at the front door. And a large percentage of those children have converted into needing a plan, whether that's a child protection plan, a child in need plan, or whether they then go on to become looked after. So, you know, it was a necessary adjustment to the threshold, but it has resulted in a significant increase in the work.
Thank you, Rachel. I didn't have that figure quite in my head, but Ofsted certainly call it in their report an exponential increase. So that's a significant word, isn't it? Exponential.
Thank you, Sue. Any other questions? Councillor Udin. Still on mute, Councillor Udin. There you go.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Just question for Rachel. Yeah. In your slide, you know, one of them, I think, assessment team, it says the children's identity and diversity needs are narrowly understood. I'm not quite sure what they meant by that, you know, narrowly understood. Can you explain a little bit more?
Yes, Councillor Udin. What Ofsted looked at the quality of the assessments that we are undertaking in relation to children, and they said that we were able to understand children's identity needs in respect of their ethnicity and their religion, and we were able to sort of well document that in the assessments. But they were talking more broadly about children's, you know, broader identity needs. So what does it mean to be a 9-year-old boy growing up in a particular community in Middlesbrough, and how does that kind of shape your expectations, etc. going forward? So they actually said that in terms of ethnicity and religion, we could capture that quite well, but it was the children's broader identity needs we needed to work harder on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Udin. Any other questions? Does anybody else want to ask a question? Nobody's got. Yes, Councillor Udin, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. Can I ask Sue? You know, on your overall findings, one of the lines, it says the immediate response to 17-year-old homeless young people. It's like we're looking at obviously our overall finding. This 16-17-year-old says homeless. Are they known to us, or they before we know them they are the homeless?
No, what we're referring to, sorry, thank you, Councillor Udin, Chair. What they're referring to is young people who present, you know, at our front door, literally or virtually, presenting as homeless. And what we have to do is give them the opportunity, talk to them about becoming looked after children. And the offer that we then give to them, and we weren't doing that properly. We weren't providing them with the service which they deserve, and we weren't offering them, I think, you know, the safety and security. So we weren't offering them the appropriate service. It's called the Southwark Judgment. The Southwark Judgment was very clear that when 16 and 17-year-olds present as homeless, we have a duty of care and we have a duty to offer them the opportunity to become looked after. And that's what we weren't doing. So we were disadvantaging them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it makes sense now. You know, obviously, when it says 16, 17, I just wondered, because if they're known to us, they shouldn't be homeless. Simple as that, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Udin. So can I just ask another question? The threshold 36% is obviously a scary number. What impact does that have on children waiting to be assessed, and what impact does that have on us financially as a local authority? Okay,
we've talked before about caseloads being high. Caseloads are certainly high, and on the presentation, I did mention that the high caseloads are, you know, at least slowing down our capacity to improve. We can't just, we have brought in some managed teams to help us with some of the work, particularly during COVID. If you remember, we had a managed team attached to the assessment service and a managed team attached to safeguarding and care planning. And we have got our Innovate team in at the moment, which is an invest to save around looked after children, particularly around some of our looked after children in residential placements. But it does mean that at the moment we are, there is little room for allocation. We do have to be very careful about the way in which we prioritise cases to make sure that children aren't kept waiting. So there is a continuous process of review to make sure that the most vulnerable children are getting assessments. But as Ofsted said in the feedback, children aren't getting assessments in as timely a way. So you have 45 working days to do an assessment. I think that's a considerable amount of time. But because of caseloads at the moment, some assessments are taking longer than that, which means it's taking longer to get to a plan and longer to be able to fully meet those children's needs. We did present to the last improvement board a sort of overview of the demand that's come into the service. And we are looking very carefully at what we can do proactively, not just to sort of put workers in just for the sake of it, but to look, we have some really good data now. Where could we bring in social workers? Where could we finance bringing in social workers to make the biggest difference? So that's where we are at the moment. And Rachel wants to come in.
Thanks. Yes, Rachel. Thank you. Thanks.
Is that okay, Chair? I just wanted to add, just to provide some assurance really, that in terms of making decisions about what needs to happen next around children, is when I've looked at the October performance data, 95% of decisions are made within 24 hours, which is the measure, and 100% within 48 hours. So we're not delaying children getting a service, but our timeliness around the completion of assessments is affected by the size of social worker caseload. So it was just to provide assurance there, just in terms of the front door. Decisions about what needs to happen next happen very swiftly.
Thank you there. That holds up. That makes that look a lot better than the number and the rise. Councillor Jeanette Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the questions, and Sue will know I'm going to ask the same one as I do every time. Due to the conversation we've just been having about social workers and high caseloads, are we still looking for more social workers? So that's one thing. Secondly, the Pathways team, how many actually people are in the Pathways team to look after the older children leaving care, etc.? And also the sickness, how the sickness is regarding. Do we have many people on sick, and if so, what reasons are they going off on sick as well? So I would imagine there'd be a lot of stress in their jobs. I'm just wondering whether we have some figures. I think I asked from last time, and I think within another meeting, I think so.
Okay, I'll do a bit on the first and third of those components of your questions, and I'll leave Rachel more specifically with the care leavers. So what are we doing to bring social workers in? Well, we do have some agency vacancies at the moment, which are out on the system, but we're not getting any responses really. There is a dearth of social workers available in the region and indeed nationally. So, for example, we have, I think it is three vacancies for the children looked after teams, and we're not getting people coming through. So that's quite a challenge. We are looking to recruit very soon. I'm working with our HR to get a recruitment campaign out as soon as we possibly can, but also making a good job of it. So there'll be a microsite, for example, with little videos from me and I hope Councillor High and Tony, just to sort of talk about Middlesbrough and getting Middlesbrough out there, because we're on quite an exciting journey. So, let's talk about that. So we have those things. And of course, bringing in a managed team is, one way of increasing capacity. At the moment, it seems that it's easier to bring in a managed team than to bring in individual agency social workers. There's usually, particularly with the company that we're using now, there is some guarantee of good social work practice. So that's where we are specifically with that. In terms of sickness, our sickness levels has actually come down slightly recently. which is quite surprising. We do have to report regularly to the Department of Education about social workers who are unavailable. That does, however, include, and that's quite high, but however, that does include social workers who are on holidays, social workers who are self-isolating, which doesn't mean, of course, that they can't do any work. And many of them, well, most of them, they all are doing work. So actually, in plain terms, our sickness has come down.
Good.
Good. In terms of the pathway teams, can I hand over to you specifically on that one, Rachel?
Yes, that's fine. In terms of the pathways team, people may remember in the last inspection, Ofsted came and said that caseloads are too high in the pathways team. So as part of the improvement plan, we've invested some additional resource in there. Caseloads have come down and are better than other parts of the service. In that team, we have a team of social workers who work with children from 15 3/4 who are still looked after, and a team of personal advisors who work with the older care leavers. We've also got a CAMS worker in there, a health worker in there, and there's a team manager and 2 assistant team managers. So that service has been resourced further since the last inspection, and caseloads are lower in that service than in the rest of children's service.
Right. Great, thank you very much for that. Can I ask just one more, just a quick question on top of that, Rachel? If you don't mind, Chair.
No, please go ahead.
Thank you. One of the things I think we actually did try to do at some time is about guaranteeing our children an interview at the job centre, if necessary. You know, when it comes to that they would actually get a different worker who was able to understand their situations. And do we still have that available in the job centre, even though it might have to be now virtual? Is that still available to our young people?
I'll have to check that actually in terms of the job centre. What we do have is work readiness workers who work specifically with our care leavers around accessing employment, education and training. So I would need to find out and come back to you in relation to specific staff in the job centre. But we do have staff who sit in the early help service who are specialised work readiness staff who support our care leavers.
Right. And we did, I think we at one point actually asked somebody from the DVLA to come in. DVLA, am I right? No?
DWP.
Yeah. DWP, it's one of them. Oops, sorry. It's because I've just done my licence again. Regarding the DWP, I'm just wondering, because we did try to make that available so that it made sure that they weren't not treated differently, but given a little bit more understanding, considering some of their situations that they come from. And I think that might be worth checking up on. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Can I just go? I missed my opportunity when Councillor Udin asked the question of the identity and diversity narrowly misunderstood. Because he brought that up, I had that question, and I also had, what are we doing to improve that? To change that? What is it we're doing? I think it was sort of covered, but I'm not entirely sure I remember how. Can you just go over that again for me, Sue?
I think that a lot of that is about awareness, and certainly, you know, having had it pointed out particularly by Ofsted, it will become part of our training and development, and also specifically part of our audit to make sure that that's covered. So yes, but some of that is about education, some of that is about awareness, and some of that is about checking through audit. Yeah,
because obviously, even in this meeting, we've had a councillor ask to ask what it meant, and then obviously, if you understand what it means, then how do you put it right? Mm-hmm. And I think if we're going down that process, we're going down the right way.
Yeah. It's a learning loop, isn't it? You identify a problem, you put in some training and development, you put in an expectation as well, you know, and then you check that it's happening.
Yeah, because I mean, there's understanding, but there's also understanding of misunderstanding. So when you know what you don't know, you know you've got to speak out. Any other questions, guys? Councillor Higgins.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. I know I'm only a visitor, but I would like to point out, as I have done in a few meetings regarding children, about how many service areas we have got within the council. And I'm sure, Anthony, you could get some managers together and try and get some jobs for our looked after children. Even if it's only a temporary 3 months or 6 months. I'm not saying give them a job if they're not capable of it, but give them a chance so that at least they've got maybe, you know, a little CV that they could go forward with. I do think that there is scope within the council, as we're all corporate parents, there is scope in the council for doing that. So I did speak to, I don't remember his name, Executive Member for Environment. Can anybody remember?
Councillor McCabe.
Yeah, Councillor. I did speak to Councillor McCabe, and he did say that he was going to have a word with Jeff Field, and he'd get back to me, but nothing's happened. So I hope it gets put forward. Thank you, Jeff, for letting me.
Just before I reply to that, Anthony, Sue wants to come in. Is that okay?
Oh, I was sorry,
Absolutely,
Chair.
yeah.
I was just going to say that I'm about to have some discussions with Jeff Field. They are, you know, I have taken that on board. So just to assure you that that will be happening. But I'll move over. I'll defer to Councillor High.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. You're dead right, Councillor Higgins. You know, these are our young people, and to try and find them some type of long-term and build their aspiration, especially if they can give back to the local authority, would be an ideal scenario and a brilliant environment for those young people. I mean, as Rachel's touched on there, we do have the work readiness teams. And as we all know, and I'm going to say this, we're a local authority that's very deprived in our finances, and the budgets that we're working with are extremely tight. You know, so even employing long-term sustainable adults is a challenge to get the right amount of people and the right amount of services across the local authority. It is a massive challenge for us to do that, but I totally share your thoughts, and be assured that wherever I can bring it onto the agenda to empower our young people in services to find an opportunity within the local authority, I certainly will be championing them. And I know Sue and Rachel, who obviously directly linked to the services, would second the fact that at every opportunity I genuinely look to champion the children of our town.
Thanks, Councillor High. Councillor Wilson, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, just a bit of a summary, Lee. Thank you, Chair. And Anthony, going back a few years ago, didn't we have something what we called the old youth training scheme that would take that on board as well?
Do you know something, Graham, that the access points for young people into employment regularly changes, which creates confusion and sometimes misdirection. Young people, not even just children in services, children leaving school, often have no idea of the route into further employment or further education. One of the things that we are doing, and we're looking to bring through it's going through procurement now, is to commission some transition workers to work across the town to support young people with some of those decisions. And that transition work will be specifically around young people moving from out of a service into the real world, moving from secondary education into life. So I'm confident that we as a local authority will be able to provide not as much as I would like. And I keep going on record to say that these services we're putting forward are nowhere near what I feel the children and the young people in Middlesbrough deserve and need. But it is a great start to try and plug some of those gaps and catch some of those young people, Graham, where they just genuinely don't know which scheme is best for them. So we are starting, and hopefully there'll be more to come. And I'll keep pushing the agenda to try and find extra finances and services to bring around wraparound care.
Let's go back now one chair, please. Yeah, I get what you're saying there, Anthony. When I had my garage, I had two youngsters straight from school, and they came in as bodybuilders and welders on car bodies. Lots of there's lots of opportunities if you can get in like that. I know that was, I can't remember what it was. I'm sure it was the old YTS game, in them days. That was back in the 80s though, so a long time ago now. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I was on a white. Yes, I was saying that is going back a bit. I did bad in Barrett's shoes, training management. Some people might sound still on a white. Yes. Right. Is there any other questions before we move on? Right. I was hoping there would be, because item agenda number 4 involves Paul Rudd and Paul Rudd and Paula Jemson, who are not with us at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump straight to item agenda number 6, and Joe is going to take over for me. Is that? Cheers, Joe.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll try and share my screen here. It was just to ask the panel to have a look at some draft terms of reference for the current scrutiny review. Just try and bring it up. I don't know if that's the right thing. Sorry. Oh no, sorry, that's the wrong document. Sorry. Hang on. There it is.
It went so well in practice.
Sorry, I know, yeah, typical, isn't it? Right. Can everybody see that?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. So the chair and vice chair and myself met recently to have a little discussion about some possible terms of reference for our review. So basically that's what I've put up on the screen. And it's just to get members' comments. There might be things that people would like to add or change, and to get agreement for these. If there's anything that people want to look at or change, we can look at amending them, and I can circulate them to the panel afterwards. I don't know if you want me to read them out, Chair, or...
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, Joe, we'll read them out and then people can have a think as they're listening.
Okay. So the terms of reference, number 1, to examine the numbers and profile of Middlesbrough's children looked after population and how we compare both nationally and to our statistical neighbours. Number 2, to establish a profile of Middlesbrough's foster carers, including current recruitment and retention initiatives, and to examine the availability of placements for children looked after in Middlesbrough. And number 3, to investigate the issues around permanency, including adoption, and to examine any initiatives and areas of best practice. And number 4, to challenge people's perceptions of children in care and to create a better understanding of children looked after for everyone involved in the process.
Thanks, Joe. I think we're on course for a number of them, and that's what we've been doing. But if there are any, if anyone wants to put anything forward to be looking at going forward, like I say, I've said this before and I'll say it again, because of the current situation within children's social care and services within this local authority, we are trying to keep as fluid as possible, so we're on top of the issues as they're happening, and I think we've been achieving that. But if anyone does have any input, it would be greatly appreciated. Can you shut that down for me, Joe, so I can see everyone?
Yes, sorry, Chair.
It's all right.
Right, hang on. Sorry about this. Stop sharing. I'm not very good at this. There we go.
So, yeah, Councillor Cook.
I just don't know whether it's worth, in the first terms of reference, having explicitly included including type of placement. So then we are continually monitoring how many foster placements, how many out of area placements, how many, so we just constantly have those figures and we're constantly comparing them against other local authorities to see the changes. I do very much like the second part where we're going to take an in-depth look at foster carers. I think that's an absolutely crucial, if we get that right, it'll make such a massive change. But yeah, I just wonder if we could add that to the first one.
Into the first one, yeah. Chair, what do you?
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea, and if we have current, if it goes with what I'm trying to do with the fluency of this scrutiny panel. We keep it fluid. We keep up to date with the figures, and therefore, if we're up to date with the figures, the questions we are asking are more relevant. So yeah, that's brilliant. Flies something. Sue, you want to come in there?
Chair, do you mind if I make a couple of comments that might be helpful?
As ever, please.
Yeah, I wondered whether two things, in the part that Joe helpfully read out, you're doing all of this great work, which I think is fantastic, and I think it's really supportive. I just wondered now, when you've got all of that information, what you want to do with it. So should somewhere there be, something that says, and with all of this information, we will make a recommendation, or we will present it to, do you know what I mean? So that you've got it all, and then your intention is to do X with it, Is there something around that?
Yeah, normally, so what would happen was once we've gathered all the evidence that the panel want to look at, the panel would come up with a final report, which would then go on to OSB, and that would contain some conclusions and findings and recommendations. So that would then go to overview and scrutiny board, and then once it's approved there, it would go to the executive for approval.
So would you want to put that on there for completion?
We wouldn't normally include it in the terms of reference, but I'm happy to put something in if you think that would be useful.
No, I mean, your explanation was helpful. I just wondered whether it was for completeness. And I suppose at the top, with the aims, it's got to reduce the numbers of looked after children. Is it to support the service to reduce the numbers?
Yes.
Because, I mean,
just
I think that, because your support is fabulous, but you're not actually going out and doing the practice. I mean, you're very welcome to train as social workers, because we need more. I mean, let's face it. But I think that just makes it a bit more balanced.
Right. Yeah, we can change that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
It's a bit like I think we've missed that sort of deliberately, but not deliberately, because it's scrutiny. I believe what we're doing at the moment is scrutiny as we go, rather than scrutinising a body of work and saying this is what we should do. We're scrutinising as we go, so we can ask the right questions to make sure that what is being done is correctly being done. If you understand what we're trying to do with that one, Councillor Jeanette Walker.
Oops, thank you. I mean, thank you for that. I think it's a good idea, all what you've done so far, and also the added things from Councillor Cook, etc. One of the things that I would like to see is an action, just a plan with the recommendations and conclusions, and then the recommendations, is to ask the service area to come up with an action plan. And I think we should have one of our own as well, regarding updates, and mind that it's a living document, and remind everybody it's a living document. And as we go and change, it has to reflect the changes of the service area and how we're doing. And I think that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, like an explanation as we're doing it, why we're doing it, when we're doing it. Yeah, that's brilliant. Councillor Wilson? Is he gone? It's frozen. We'll bring Councillor Cook in till Councillor Wilson comes back.
I think, should there also be something around the service health? And maybe around monitoring, like staff morale, and like how's the team coping? Would there be something, maybe if we took a snapshot of how certain members of the teams are feeling from different levels, and just say like, I feel like it's too much, it feels quite stressful, and then see what they're like by the end of the report, and to sort of see the impact as it's going forward. So
you mean like sort of instead of taking a service user and saying how are the changes we're making benefiting you, we go to somebody within the service and say, how are these affecting you? Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Yeah. Councillor Wilson, are you back yet? No, got a little orange triangle. So we'll go to Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. It's also good once you've got the towards the end, before you take it to the overview, to ask the people of the service, like Sue and Rachel, tell them what you're proposing, and then ask them, have we missed anything? And so before it goes and gets passed, then if they say, oh no, that's great, that's everything we want, that's what, you know. So it has been done in a few scrutiny panels because they're actually in the service themselves. And we've had a look, well, you've had a look, and I think it's a good idea if you ask the service area themselves, not for them to say, oh, I don't like that, that puts us in a bad light, but to improve.
Yeah, I think what we've done, well, what we've tried to do with this scrutiny panel is Sue's come in. She's new to the local authority. This is a scrutiny that is to scrutinise her and her teams, but because she's new to the position, relatively new now. What we done initially was: are there areas of what's going on now that you haven't had time to change that need scrutiny? And we do that. We do that, like, keep it fluid. So we're doing something similar, but yet towards the end, if there's anything we have missed, obviously this is what this panel's here for. But if there's anything, you know, the communication between ourselves and Sue is absolutely amazing. Obviously, the communication between ourselves and the deputy mayor as well. It is this. I do believe that our scrutiny panel is going the right way on scrutiny and how we're doing it in this time. But yeah, that's a good idea. That Councillor Higgins, make sure that we do involve them in the.
I think your scrutiny panel is absolutely, and that's why I wanted to come in. And I hope I wasn't overstepping the mark when I said what I've just said.
No. It's something that I've you know, I am new to all this, and when we took the panel with us initially to say we were going to be very fluid, we're not going to do it as it was done in the past, because what's going on at the minute has never been the same in the past, and I think what we do and what we are doing is helping, and certainly I do speak to Sue and say to Sue, you know, are there any areas any areas we're missing? Is there anything that you think that, you know, we're not doing? And it's not scrutiny for scrutiny's sake, but yeah, you're right. Does anybody else want any questions or want to add anything? No. Right. So, Joe, Sue, item agenda 4. Sue, is that something you feel you could take on without the help of Paul and Paula, or are we to adjourn it and bring it in another time?
No, I think Rachel and this before we started, and Rachel's going to kick off. I'll chip in, and we'll wait for Pauline. Sorry, I do apologise. Paul and Paula to join us, and then they will pick up.
Excellent, thank you. I thought it was me who was going to have the trouble with the Paul and Paula, but you got there before me.
Thank you, Councillor, for your vote of confidence.
Excellent. Right, so the item agenda number 4 is sufficiency and permanency, perceptions of children in care, further information. So can I hand over to you, Sue?
Okay, Rachel, Joe, could you put the slides up for us, please?
Caroline, are you doing that, or do you want me to put them on?
I think it's on the second half of the slide pack.
That's fine, I'll bring them up for you, Joe.
Okay, thanks, Caroline.
It'll just take a minute. It should be coming up now, Chair.
There was a good, I would say, 30 to 40-second gap at planning with documents going up. So that was particularly awkward, but not the same this time. Brilliant.
Okay, Chair, just to kick it off then, this is information around placement stability and breakdown. It's gone into some detail, but there is always detail under the detail, as it were. So you've got an overview here, and I hope you find that it's helpful. Again, you'll see our Middlesbrough logo there in terms of Middlesbrough Children Matter. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions in terms of where children are and where children are placed. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel just to start it off, and we'll see when colleagues join us.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Sue. Paul and Paula, I'm being careful to say that correctly, are both in a meeting with our commissioner at the moment, which is why that meeting was running from 4 to 5. So they've both, Paula is the head of service for looked after children and corporate parenting, and Paul Rudd is the head of service for Futures for Families. So I will try my best to do them justice, and if we have any questions that I can't answer, I'll certainly take them away and get you any additional information. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, Caroline, thank you. Again, the logo, our superheroes, we're unashamedly showing this everywhere. You can move on to the next slide. Okay, so this slide gives us some information in terms of placement type and provision. So you'll see from the circle on the left-hand side that actually 73% of all of our looked after children are placed in foster care, and that is foster care including connected carers. And of the 73% who are in foster placements, 52% are in our own provision. So it's a pretty 50-50 split with our own provision and our independent fostering and connected carers. The table underneath gives you a breakdown in terms of what the placement types are for children. So you'll see that we've got 343 children in our own local authority foster placement, 125 in private. It breaks down some of our connected carers. It talks about how many children are in our residential homes, for example. So if you can move on to the next slide. This slide talks about the number of children who are placed outside of the town. And this is published data which Ofsted look at, and it shows that 51%, so that blue line which runs across the top, 51% of our children are said to be placed outside of the town. But I wanted to sort of add to that just to give a little bit of context, because the performance data hot off the press from October is that only 18% of our children are placed at a distance more than 20 miles. So whilst we may have a lot of children placed outside of the town, they may be in Redcar, they may be in Stockton, you know, and really 82% of our children are placed within 20 miles of Middlesbrough. So I think that's really important additional information to give assurance. Our placement stability, which we'll move on to in the next slide, is actually higher than the national average, higher than our statistical neighbours.
I was just going to come in there, Rachel, and say that if you're working, for example, in a large county, you will have a much bigger figure who are within your, your county, as it were, but actually then a much, so you're much, and then a much smaller figure, as it were, for sort of 20 miles. So it's a very different way of looking at things. So I worked in Cumbria for a while and in Gloucestershire indeed, and actually, a great deal of children were placed within Gloucestershire, but a much smaller number within 20 miles. So it's all in all, Middlesbrough's figures are okay.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of placement stability, again, this is a well kind of regarded measure, and we'll look at how stable children's placements are. And I think this is a relatively positive picture as well, because 64% of children who've been looked after for more than 2.5 years have remained in the same placement for that period of time. So we've got 123 children who've been looked after in the same placement for more than 2 years. I think it's important to explain that in some respects, placement moves are sometimes because of placement breakdown, which we would want to reduce the likelihood of that as far as possible. But other placement moves are purposeful. So you may have a child who moves from their foster placement into their adoptive placement, which for the purposes of the data would be a placement move, but we would see that as a positive placement move. We can move on to the next slide, please. In terms of the number of children who, in terms of the number of placements in the last 12 months, of all of our looked after children, this is telling us that 469 children are in their first and only placement. Again, a really good measure. So I think today Middlesbrough have got about 683 children looked after. Of those children, 469 are in their first and only placement, which again is a positive story in terms of placement stability. You can see further down the graph that, we have some children who have had 5 placement moves, some children who have had 4, 49 children have had 3 placement moves, 147 children have had 2 placement moves in the last 12 months.
Just to come in again there, Rachel, only because I looked on the dashboard today and it says 680 children looked after. It's just that the figure is slightly beginning to come down a bit. As you know, it's been very high and it is still very high. Let's not mistake that. But at the moment, we're just seeing a slight decline, which we really hope is the beginning of a longer decline in the number, positively in the numbers of children looked after.
Yeah, there's been a slight decrease over the last 4 months. So month on month, we've seen a slight decrease. I think it was at a high of about 695 in July. But yes, that is positive. Next slide, please. This gives, of those children from April to October, this gives the number of placements that have broken down in the given month, and it also identifies the placement type. So if you look at October, we've had 2 of our in-house placements have broken down, and we've had 2 of our IFA placements have broken down. Back in September, we had 2 placements from residential, not in-house residential, in-house fostering and IFA. And then back to April, that gives a breakdown of month on month, the numbers of placement breakdowns. You can see with connected carers, we've only had 1 connected carer placement breakdown over that period of time from April to October. Next slide, please. And this slide really gives an outline of some of the initiatives in the work that we're doing in relation to preventing placement breakdowns and improving placement stability. So the corporate parenting strategy has at its heart improving the quality and sufficiency of placements we have in Middlesbrough, and also improving stability of those placements. The Innovate Social Work team is working really hard with a cohort of children who need additional support to maintain what we would call foster placements that are under pressure. We have our Futures for Families hub, which both of you in Scrutiny will have heard a lot about. We're doing a lot of work on our electronic systems, which will support improved social work practice and improved performance reporting, so we can make sure that we understand what all of the issues are for children in placements in Middlesbrough. The LCS transformation work is also supporting better data analysis. We've also recently introduced a placement disruption procedure, which has been reviewed and improved, and we're offering really intensive support to fragile placements. I think that's the end of the slide. Caroline, is it? Yeah. Okay, so Sue, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
No, I don't think so. The corporate parenting strategy is a strategy that we are still working on and putting together. And indeed, that might be something that I'm sure that will be something this scrutiny will be interesting. It incorporates our sufficiency strategy, our commissioning strategy, and our participation strategy. So a big piece of work there, and also a partnership that is emerging, or has emerged, between the innovations team, the managed team that we've brought in, and Futures for Families is really effective. They complement each other in terms of, the Innovate team identifying children, assessing whether they can return back to Middlesbrough or stepping down to a foster placement, and the Innovate team being able to support them in those moves. So that's been a really positive partnership. And I see that Paul has joined us. Yeah. Hello, Paula.
Hi, everybody. Apologies for being late.
You arrived just at the right time, as
I
I
know,
finished
yes.
the slide deck.
I know. Couldn't have timed it better, but if anybody's got anything that I can add to it, then...
Can I just... the corporate parenting strategy, Alma's here today as well, and I'm keen to make sure that we push corporate parenting on all councillors. And can I just suggest that when if it's a body of work and it isn't finished yet, when it is finished, all councillors get a copy of it.
Could I just come in there, Chair, please, on the back of what you said?
Yes, please.
So the consultation with the corporate parenting strategy ended on the 31st of October, and I was in conversation with the person who's been compiling it with Bill, and we're hoping to have an ad hoc meeting, just a one-off, where we just simply talk about the corporate parenting strategy and the changes that's been made as a result of the consultation. Do you think it might be worth inviting all councillors to that presentation, so that we were going to have it for the corporate parenting board, but I'm thinking, in light of what you've just said, that maybe
I think it's a must. Yeah, I think we need to. Like we said before, we need to start recruiting more councillors to the idea of corporate parenting and just exactly what it involves.
So when we get a date, then I'll get Susie, who will invite us all, to invite all councillors to the latest feedback on the corporate parenting strategy. Do you think, Sue and Rachel, that's a really good idea, isn't it? And then we'll get it widely recognised. Yeah. Okay, we'll do that then, Lee. I'll speak to Susie and we'll sort that out. Thank you very much.
And like I've said before to members who are here today as well, can we champion it with other councillors who maybe aren't part of any children's scrutiny panels or children's meetings? Can we champion it to them and say, look, you need to take part. You need to take part, yeah.
Absolutely, please. That'd be really helpful. I've just been talking to the Commissioner earlier this afternoon about engagement with all councillors as corporate parents. So that would be a really good thing to feed back on, that this is the way we're moving forward on it. So thanks, Lee, for that support. Thanks.
Brilliant. Are there any other questions at the committee? Councillor Cook.
I know that we'll look at children being out of area, but is there any data on children continuing to attend the same school? Because actually, if they're within like the distance of the same school that they're attending, that's probably more of a good metric of them having a stability and continuous time and care, rather than just, because they're in Grangetown, they're getting marked as this out of area.
Rachel, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I can do. Thank you, Chair. We do have very detailed information available from the virtual school in relation to children's education placements, because obviously the education placement often is such an important indicator to support the foster placement, if you like. So we can get that information for you, Councillor Cook, in terms of a future meeting, and we do try and avoid education placement disruptions unless we absolutely have to. So in the main, we work very closely with the virtual school to ensure consistency of school placement if children need to go into a foster placement.
Thank you. That's a great question when it comes to disruption. It's something that's missed. Councillor Udin.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just, the previous graph, our last one, I think, was it? Yeah, where it says October, 2 IFA placement and 2 our own placement broken down. how long were they on placement? Actually, how long were they there before broken down? Both of them, the our own and the IFS one. Rachel?
Yeah, I don't have that actual child level information at this point, but I'm not sure if Paula and Paul actually looked at it at that level.
I certainly can do. It's information that is available to us, so I can certainly have a look into that and get back. So I can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, how long they lasted, in placement. Then again, once they're broken down, what are we doing? Are we putting extra resources or this is changing over? Or
so I can talk about this.
Yeah.
We've got a process that we're currently embedding with social workers where we are looking at fragile placements, and we're working very closely with Paul and the Future for Families team, who are offering intensive support to placements to try and stabilise them. We're also embedding a process of care team meetings monthly, which allow us to identify when placements become unstable so that we can put the support in at an early stage to prevent them from deteriorating further. So that's going to have senior management oversight. So there's going to be panels that are arranged that are attended by myself as head of service, Paul for resources and fostering, Future for Families, and the commissioning service, where we work together to make sure that independent fostering agencies, Future for Families, and our in-house fostering service are putting support, wrapping support around children in unstable placements to prevent them placements from breaking down. That support can include respite, it can include outreach support for the children, it can include outreach support for the carers. So it will be a comprehensive support package.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Any other questions from the panel? Councillor Higgins.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. At the meeting we were at earlier for the children in education, one of the facts that came up that really shocked me, that one of the schools have something like over 90% of the children that are excluded, that are looked after children. And I know that panel is looking into it, but I thought if your panel could put that on to look at as well, for getting it at both sides, we might be able to get something done, because that's a shocking statement that one school have the highest number of excluded children, and it needs to be found out why, whether they're frightened of the stats or, Ofsted reports if they're not good enough. It really upset me, that. So I'm not telling you what to do, Chair, but I think the more people that look into this, the better.
Paula, are you going to come in there?
I was just going to say we're certainly strengthening communication and links with virtual schools. So I meet with Victoria Banks, the head of virtual schools, on a monthly basis, and we review children who have low school attendance, children who are at risk of exclusion, etc., so that we can make sure that there's senior management oversight of those children and appropriate plans in place.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Higgins?
Sorry, Chair, I just want somebody to find out why one particular school has excluded 90%, say, of the children, and
yes, so
and not the case in others.
Can you come in there, so?
Just to clarify, it is there is an issue around one school, and I know that is going to be looked into from the meeting this morning, but it's fixed term exclusions rather than permanent exclusions. But you are right, Councillor Higgins, it is something that we need to very carefully look at. In the meeting this morning, we were talking about how schools have their own behavioural policies, and some schools have different attitudes and ethos to others. But I know that it's something very clearly on Trevor Dunn's agenda. And certainly something that can be reported here, but it is something that is under scrutiny from the Education Scrutiny Committee this morning. But I would share Councillor Higgins' concerns.
Yeah, at the end of the day, when you get data back, if data shows you something, you've got to act on it. Otherwise, there's no point in scrutinising data. So you're quite right. Are there any other questions from the panel? Councillor Wilson, you had your hand up earlier on, and we lost you. Do you still want to ask that question that you were going to ask earlier?
I'm not quite sure it was actually, Chair.
Right.
Something to do with independent supported living. I've just saw the numbers there, but I'm not quite sure if that was the right question at the time. But I'd like to ask that one anyway, independent supported living. Go ahead with that one.
Yeah, would you like to ask it, or?
Yeah, I'm looking at you see it, Chair. I'm calling this, we've got independent living. Is that 5 people in independent living or somewhere else? On personal type provision.
What slide and what number? Which point?
I need to see the slide.
I believe. Sorry, if you don't mind me.
No, please do.
These 5 children were independent placement, which is IFA placement. Yeah, independent fostering.
That's the one. Yeah, 5. It's good on there. So it's 5. It just says
Independent living.
Yeah.
Oh, it's different. Yeah.
Paul Rudd, is that supported lodgings?
Yes.
Yes. So that's a supported lodgings provider, which we would assess and recruit supported lodgings providers and their children who are placed, which is more more independent than a fostering placement, but is a move on placement into independence.
It's like a halfway house type of thing then. Where you actually move them, help them. You help. It's fought for what is it, 12 months, and then when you get about 17, 18-year-old, then the sort of move on with it.
Supported lodgings providers are a lot like foster carers. They're asked to provide a room in their house. We assess them. We ensure that they're, all the checks are undertaken and they've got the skills to support a young person who may be moving on from foster placement into independence. So it's living in a family, but it's encouraging more independence.
Right, so it's not like a flat somewhere in a building where you've got like a multiple like that. No, that new one that we're coming up there, Paul, didn't Daniel Court, something like that maybe?
Yeah, Daniel Court would come under the residential accommodation part, and that's our new service for young people who are 16, 17 to prepare for independence.
Yeah, that's all. I've got mixed up with that one, Paul. That was all. I was looking at that one as well. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Right, before we move on, so can I ask for further information on the Innovate team, Futures for Families, because I don't think we've got that much information on them.
You mean for a future meeting, Chair?
Yes, please. Yes. It's
Okay.
the one item information I struggled with when we were talking about it earlier.
Of course, and I'm sure Paul will return to talk about Futures for Families because it is his baby.
Excellent, and maybe have the opportunity to speak to some of the families that are being helped, and maybe feed back anonymously to the panel. Would that be possible?
Paul?
Yes, we've got some anecdotal evidence from families, and we can include that definitely in any report that we do.
That's excellent. Thank you. Right, if there's no more questions, we'll move on to item agenda number 7, which is OSB. Now, I didn't attend OSB, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm just giving you some details that have been put in front of me. The 5th of November, bonfire night, which is quite noisy. Some councillors were more noisy than others, Mr Deputy Mayor. Sounded like he was giving his report from a bonfire, from a firework display. OSB considered the Executive Forward Work Programme, Middlesbrough Council COVID-19 response, the Chief Executive and Director of Public Health, the Executive Member update, Deputy Mayor and Lead Member for Children's Social Care, Councillor High, OSB membership, final report from Adult Social Care and Services Scrutiny Panel, physical activity for older people 65 plus. That was interesting. The final report from the Children and Young People's Learning Scrutiny Panel addressing the poverty issues and the impact on learning. And the final report on Economic Development and Environment and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel and Teesside Crematorium. And the Scrutiny Panel Chair's updates were also included. It was quite an interesting meeting. I would urge anyone to go back and look at it on YouTube because it was an interesting meeting. Right, so that brings us to a close. Thank you for everybody for attending tonight. Thank you for Councillor Dodds, did you want to say something? You're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah. Still on mute. There you go.
Right, I'll start again.
Excellent.
Talking about fireworks coming through Councillor High's mic. I don't live far from Councillor High. They were coming to his mic and they were coming through my windows, so it was stereophonic sound. I didn't dare switch my mic off because you wouldn't have heard a thing. Just to end on a light note, it's been a lovely meeting. I enjoyed it. And I would like to say as well, I've said it before, I have spoken to a number of social workers and they all say there is such a difference since Sue Butcher arrived. They are all pulling much better and working more positively. So I think we do have a lot to thank Sue for, and I'm sure Rachel as well. Well, thank you, both of you, everybody, for coming today.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
Thank you, Councillor Dodds. I appreciate that. I'm very proud of the workforce. They really are working their socks off to make things better. So it's very, very much an ethos that I am sure I know runs through Children's Services.
Brilliant. It's always good to end on a positive note. Thank you. The next meeting is Monday the 7th of December at 4 p.m. There are no other urgent items to be considered at all. But yeah, the next meeting is Monday the 7th of December at 4 p.m. And that brings me to draw this meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night. Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye all.